Great, thanks. Thanks so much for inviting me along today. My name's Paula Baker. I'm site manager for the RSPB at Loch Lomond Nature Reserve, which is just in South Scotland, just over in the southeast corner of Loch Lomond. I've been working for the RSPB for about 20 years now, so all of that time's been on nature reserves. And so I've got quite a variety of different experiences that I've built up over that time. And so I thought I'd tell you a little bit about my kind of journey to get here, and also just a little bit about what I do in my current role and what I've done previously. And as you can see, I am outside on the reserve, so just give you a little bit of a view. Unfortunately, it's pouring with rain here, so we can't see the nice hills and stuff in the background, but I promise they're there. I'll try to stop moving just now because everyone will get motion sick. Yes, so I started working for the RSPB in about 2005. Prior to that, I did a degree in geography, a BSc at the University of Leicester. And I guess I was just quite determined at that time to get a degree that and then go into something that was actually related to that, because that's just what I had in my head that I wanted to do. I wanted to go and do something related to my geography degree, and the degree was quite wide ranging, and you pick up quite a lot of transferable skills from that. So my first proper job after university was I worked for an organisation called Waste Watch, and at that time it was just when the doorstep recycling schemes were kicking off around the UK. So my job was to go and knock on people's doors and try and get them to sign up to doorstep recycling. And some people, would already be doing everything, and other people it would be quite challenging even to get them to recycle a newspaper. So it was just the really, really early days when that was all kicking in. And then after that, I looked at quite a variety of different jobs, but I saw that the RSPB did a residential volunteering scheme. So what that means is you could live and work on a reserve for a set period of time, get loads of experience, your expenses were covered, you got to stay in a nice accommodation, and it just seemed like a really good way to build up that type of experience, I guess, because although I've always had a love for nature and the natural environment, I hadn't really done anything work-wise towards any kind of career in it. When I was working for Waste Watch, I remember having a conversation with somebody, and I was telling them I was applying for conservation roles, and they said, "Oh, you shouldn't bother. It's way too competitive. Yeah, go for something else." And again, that just kind of triggered something in my mind of, well, someone has to get these jobs. So why can't it be me? I just need to get myself in the place where I've got the right experience to do roles in the sector that I want to work in. So the volunteering was part of that journey. So I went and worked at a site in Yorkshire called Blacktoft Sands over the winter. So freezing cold, snow, pretty kind of isolated place, but absolutely beautiful, stunning place for wildlife. And I guess I just kind of fell in love with the idea of working on nature reserves and just went with it from that. I did things like the first ever bird surveys. I learned stuff about moth trapping. I learned stuff about just nature conservation in general and about the RSPB. So it was a really interesting start place. And then after that, I went and worked in a place called South Stack, which is in Wales, a big heathland reserve with overlooking a seabird colony. So I was looking at puffins and gannets and guillemots and things every day, and kind of running a visitor centre there. So showing that to lots of different people. And then after that, I got my first permanent position. And so I moved up to Scotland to work at Loch Lomond Reserve, which is a big wetland site, very popular with members of the public. So my kind of early roles were more to do with interacting with visitors about nature and wildlife, and not so much about the ecological delivery. But during the time that I was there, an opportunity came up with the RSPB for me to do an intensive management development program, which they haven't actually done again since I did it. But the idea was they wanted, I think there was a bit of a gap in people who were moving up through the organisation from like a assistant warden, visitor type roles into the people who could actually manage the nature reserves in the future. So I got a place on that scheme, and that took place over 2 years. So I was still doing my job, and it was just like every now and again I would go off and do a week's course or something in like health and safety management or ecology skills or learning about how to run a shop, because some of our nature reserves do have shops. Sorry, there's a truck just about to move off. I am live from the reserve, so they're just off to go and do wetland bird count because it's web survey day. Yeah, so I did that intensive program, and that just put me in a really good place to kind of move into site management. So the RSPB bought the Loch Lomond site in 2012, and I knew they would be advertising for a site manager, so I kind of set my sights on wanting to go for this place. I just thought it'd be a fantastic opportunity. It was not that far from where I lived at the time, so it wasn't like a huge uplift of everything. And then I was successful in the post here, and I've been here since 2013, so quite a while now in this role, 12 years. And it's a really interesting varied role, site managers in nature conservation, because I suppose my overall responsibility is that I'm responsible for everything that happens on the bit of ground that the RSPB manages, which sounds like it could be quite a lot, but obviously there are quite a few bits that take care of themselves. I have a team of staff here, I have a team of volunteers, and you kind of pick and choose different projects or work to focus on at different times. So it's not kind of a constant number of things that need to be done. And actually it's a really varied role, which means that I get to use a lot of skills that I have, but also develop new ones. So this site in particular has got a farming element to it. So the sheds behind me and the one I'm standing in, they're used for our livestock. So we work with a local grazier on who does conservation grazing on site. So we use sheep and we use cows for that. And when I had started in this job, I really knew the bare minimum about how to manage using livestock. So that was a big part of what I learned about at the beginning. I actually spent some time on my sabbatical over on one of the other RSPB sites with a farm, and did some lambing and just kind of saw all the day-to-day stuff that farmers have to do, because it's really important to me when you're working with people, especially in partnership, that you understand their perspective and how they have to operate so that you can bring what we need to them and kind of meet in the middle and compromise. So understanding the pressures that farmers are under, the different things they have to do with their animals, the different bits of paperwork they have to do, really helped me to be able to implement that well on the site. I've also had an opportunity to do a lot of project management. So one of the things about this site is when we started, although it had been a nature reserve for a long time, and has got loads of different called like nature designations for rare species, rare plants, rare birds, there wasn't very much here for visitors, and there wasn't actually infrastructure for staff to work here because it's always been managed remotely, and the land was in private ownership before the RSPB came. So it was quite a big shift, and I had to pretty much put in everything. So the road that we drive in on was a project I was involved with. The office that's just behind me over there I was involved with getting that set up and installed for the first time. We've put in nature trails for visitors. So I think that's 3 different projects where we've put in different trails, including one that was about £250,000 project to take a path from one end of the site all the way down to the loch shore, because you couldn't actually really get down there, and a big reason people come to Loch Lomond is because they want to see Loch Lomond. So that was something that I helped to develop and install. I'm also involved with a partnership project that's just almost completed, right next to this building that I'm in. We're doing a tree nursery, so we're working as part of the work in the national park. There's a lot of landscape restoration projects, and one of them's focused around uplands and temperate rainforest, because we have rainforests in Scotland, just a different kind. And we are working with the Countryside Trust in this area to collect seeds, plant them up, and then go back out and plant them into areas where some of the seeds, some of the trees, some of the plants have been lost, to try to restore big areas of upland, and where rainforest would have been and could be in the future. So yes, it's a really interesting job. I think a big part of my job is managing staff and volunteers. So because to be successful even in an outdoor environment, you want to have a good, strong team that work well together, who trust each other, who can challenge each other to make sure that things don't just always happen exactly the same way. And so a big part of my job is trying to maintain that balance as well. One of the things I really enjoy is things like recruiting and training new people, seeing them move through their careers into other jobs as well. It's sometimes really difficult when you get to know someone and then they leave for another job, but to me that's a success, because you don't always stay in the same place throughout your career. You want to see people achieving their goals, so part of my role is to help support that as well. I also get to, from the sidelines, look at exciting projects that other members of the team do, and one of those was the EU Life project, one of the last projects funded by the EU before Brexit. Funded a lot of equipment for us to use for different conservation management purposes. So I've only ridden in it a couple of times, but Luke, our warden, gets to go out and about in our fancy tractor, which hopefully you can just about see there. So it's got really low ground pressure tracks, which means we can take it into the really wet parts of the site, which are abundant. And so, yeah, he gets to go out in the tractor quite a lot. The warden team get to do practical stuff. I'll also just take you over here to see another all-terrain vehicle. This one's called an Argo Cat. And I'm not sure if you can see that because it's quite dark over here. This one's got 8 wheels. And this one is semi-aquatic, so you can go across the mud and then you can go into a pond and then you can come out the other side. So that's used a lot in upland work. It's used a lot in deer management. I don't know if you can hear, but the rain has just suddenly got really heavy here. But I think that's been about me talking for 15 minutes. So it's probably a good place to stop and see if you have any questions for me, which I'm very happy to answer. But thanks so much for listening.
That was fabulous, Paula. Can I ask anyone who's listening at the moment, if they have any questions, please pop it into the chat for us and we can ask Paula. We appreciate you doing this today, Paula, especially when the weather's maybe not so great where you are. And
for some reason my phone is really quiet, and with the rain I can hardly hear you, so I'm just putting you up to my ear, okay?
Oh, fabulous. I'll talk a bit louder. So, Paula, what would you say, obviously it's a really varied role, what would you say is your favourite part of the job?
think my favourite part is anytime I get to do things like this, to be honest, where I get to talk to other people about what I love doing and what I've done for my whole career, inspiring people about nature, or hearing from them really inspiration, like really cool things that they've done in nature where it's just really made an impact in their life. Because, you know, that's what, as an organisation, the RSPB is trying to do. So that's what makes me really happy, is just when people get that same passion that I get.
Fabulous. Well, I've got one here for you, Paula. It says, "Hello, I'm Beth. I'm a conservation ecology student at Oxford Brookes Uni, hoping to move to the Cairngorms in a few years. Paula, do you have any recommendations for a graduate to get experience in the field? And or is there anything which you think is really useful to have as a skill experience trying to go into a conservation position?" What a great question.
That's fantastic. Yes, thanks, Beth. I mean, the default answer I always used to give was volunteer, but, you know, volunteering is something that relies on you having financial resource to be able to give up your time for free. So I guess while you're at uni, you'll probably find there's societies and organisations to get involved with. But I think a really good tip would be to look at the jobs that you want to do and see what their requirements are. And also to remember that you don't need to have all of them to apply. You know, so focus on some really key things that you're passionate about, because that will really help you with building up the experience. So if you know you want to do a conservation job, you should get really good at learning your bird species or your Scottish mammals, or, you know, these are the kind of things that you're going to be doing day to day. Like, go and deep dive into the ecology of beavers or something, especially for a job in the Cairngorms, because there's been a lot of work done there for reintroducing beavers, and just get really good at something that you can talk passionately about. I mean, if you do have the capacity to do some volunteering or to get involved in any kind of practical land management, then when you can, you should. I would also thoroughly recommend, there's various organisations, not just RSPB, but that do residential volunteering. It's something you can do whilst you're also working part-time as well, so you don't have to entirely fund yourself, because it's just a really great way to get a really intensive amount of experience in a relatively short time. You know, if you give up 6 months and work a volunteer for all of that time and live and work on a site, you properly immerse yourself in that organisation, and that's a really great way to understand what they're looking for and to also work out if that's what you want to do.
Fabulous answer there, Paula. We have another question in for you from Gina. Paula, where was your starting point on your route to management? What advice would you give to others with an interest in nature and conservation? Another great question.
Another really good question. Thank you. My starting point on the route to management. So when I went to work in my first full-time job, a requirement of that was that I would line manage somebody else in the team. And the RSPB in particular are very good at providing training for managers. It's not the case for all organisations. I know that from other conversations I have with people, but there's a lot of really good resources online. So even if you don't have the opportunity to access, you know, training, there's really good books, like the 1 Minute Manager. That's a really good one for just getting a good idea of how you do different things. Like sometimes as a manager, you have to do things you don't like. You have to have confrontations. You have to address behaviours or work that's not really going the way you want. So resources like that are really good. But I think really what really pushed me along the route was that intensive training program, but also that I always wanted to do better, to support people better. And so I always wanted to train and to take on board the various experience that people were willing to share with me. But, you know, managing staff in conservation is no different from management anywhere else. It's about understanding people. It's about giving them your time. It's about having honest conversations and supporting people with what they want to do.